In this video, I just want to quickly cover a calculator that I built to look at annual revenue and kind of look at projections to work out if I've got a goal of X, how would that break down monthly into monthly targets, but then also, which I'll show a little bit later on, what happens if I'm off target for a particular month and how does that affect the following months. So before we dive in, it's probably worth highlighting the top three rows where essentially what I've decided to put in as the revenue target is 120 grand. Um, I mainly picked that because 100 grand was a good, nice round number, added an extra 20 grand on there for some tax, and that's how I came to that number. Looking at price, part of the reason why I've created this calculator is to look at how different price points might affect the efforts or what needs to be done in order to kind of achieve that goal. And then looking at a close rate. So obviously this close rate of 3% is heavily dependent on the market, on the funnel you've got in place, and that might be a really high conversion rate for some markets, might be somewhat low if you've got a really well established brand and you know the demand for a particular product. So obviously this is highly relative, but having said that, this whole concept is more of a North Star rather than actually being solid actual figures that you're definitely going to hit and they're going to be perfect every time round. So this is more just to kind of see how far off track you might be and what you might need to focus on to correct course, but also what are the implications of decisions you make up front. So for example, looking at that revenue goal of 120 grand and kind of looking at, I'll go through what these columns are in a second, but looking at that revenue number of being £100 and then looking at the sales needed per month, that might be 300 sales sessions a month, 3,333 sales sessions a month. But if I change the product to being £1,000, sorry, then that plummets obviously. So it has quite a significant impact on what you can achieve. But obviously, you need to work out a product or a service that can deliver on that amount of value. So obviously this video is in the context of a wider conversation I'm having about pragmatically looking for profits. So there is some flexibility in working out what kind of product I might offer at what price point. So maybe something like 349 might feel a bit more accessible to myself based on the market I'm looking at and the product I'm thinking of putting in there. So that might suggest that I need to look for a market that can sustain having almost 1,000 people a month in a sales session, which might be a sales call, it might be a webinar, it might be a really aggressive sales letter video. It could be any number of things, but the point being, I need to be confident I can get 1,000 people into that who are kind of optimized from the perspective of they are interested in that type of product and they have got that type of problem. So yeah, but bringing it back, let's just take a step back and have a look at what the columns are, and I'll talk a little bit about what has gone into some of the numbers and why I haven't just done one calculation, which is essentially 120,000 divided by 12, which I'll come to in a second. So looking at this from a column by column basis, the first column is revenue so far. So I'm assuming in month one there is no money in the bank, and that hopefully when I reach each sales target for each month, which you can see here being 10,000 at this point, that number of money in the bank increases by 10,000. Obviously, once you start revenue generating, you're going to put more money into ad spend, hopefully, and there'll be returns and certain things like that. So this isn't necessarily going to be pure profit, it's just revenue, money that's come into the project. And just a kind of North Star of what we've achieved in terms of revenue target for the year. Then the next column isn't super important, but it's something I like to have there, and it's just kind of how far away from you are you from the revenue goal. So obviously when there's no money generated, you're £120,000 away from the goal. And once you made your first 10,000, then you're 110,000 away from the goal. I just find that kind of a useful number, which obviously is just the inverse of what you've got here. So it's not super important, but I just like to have that there. Then the next column is looking at the monthly revenue target. Obviously, at this point it's pretty consistent at 10,000 a throw. But if, for example, in this month I was over, the numbers should start to fall from what's needed from the months following. So it's in there because it can be played with at a certain point, essentially. Next, we're looking at the sales needed for a month. So what we're looking at here is we've got the sales price being at 349 and a close rate of 3%. So based on that, we're looking at we'll probably need 29 sales needed in the month. Now, breaking down the sales price by the monthly revenue target, we could need 29 sales for the month. So obviously that is giving me a kind of very direct, specific North Star of what I'm trying to hit. And then equally off the back of that, then knowing that my 3% conversion rate, so right, that now means that I need to get just under 1,000 people into a sales session each month to close 29 sales if my conversion rate is roughly 3%. So obviously having that alongside the sales sessions needed per day is a really, really strong, easy to understand, very precise. Here's what I need to get done for the day. Have I got 43 people into the sales session for the day? If not, what am I going to do to make sure that that happens going forwards, or do I need to compensate? But also, when you're thinking about if I'm trying different multiple marketing channels, we can see that, okay, something is going to have a hope or a chance of hitting that 43 people into the sales session per day, and some things aren't. So that's going to be helping to clarify lots of decisions made later on in the game. And then obviously total revenue, which is essentially the same number as revenue so far. Looking at that, it's obviously pretty simple. It's not going to be revolutionary in terms of breaking down goals into more actionable bite-sized chunks to focus on. But that just gives you a kind of little bit of an insight to how I think about things and what I'm going to be using for a kind of, let's say, the backbone of the project as it rolls forward, as I find a market, as I find a price point that I feel comfortable with in targeting that goal, which I think I'm going to try and to avoid $27 products or below unless I spot a market that is just particularly easy to interact with and has a very, very, very low anticipated cost per acquisition. Then I think that, because that just means building up the traffic to a quite considerable size, which can be quite a lot of effort. And with a low margin product, I can't do some things that would allow me to just instantly buy that traffic. And considering the time constraint of a year, which isn't an insignificant amount of time, but it's just working full time, obviously, and some other things would just make it a bit harder, in my opinion, to achieve that size of traffic. But also just kind of managing that number of interactions if there's returns and stuff, or kind of those sales engagements, prompting questions and things like that. You can imagine having interacted with 148,000 people, sometimes, depending on the project, can yield customer service challenges, let's say. Not necessarily problems, but just kind of managing volume, which you can work around with FAQs and such. But I think at this point I'm more interested in going for a much higher price point, probably somewhere around the $500 price point, not sterling, but so that might be somewhere around, let's say, 460. So looking to get about 725 people into the sales session each month, which seems easily doable. But then obviously you've got to find something that people will be willing to spend 460 on. Also, I should highlight this is single sales, so it's not monthly recurring revenue. I've got another calculator for monthly recurring revenue, which I'll look at another time. And that obviously means that you're dealing with much lower numbers of customers, but maybe going in to develop that product needs a lot more work rather than just producing a PDF for maybe a very short course. I might have to delve into actually building a product, which ideally would be single feature, but might not be the case. I'm going to do the hunting around to work out what needs and desires there are out there and what I might be able to fulfill. But for now, I'm working on the assumption that it might be a single sale, just because building digital products in terms of ebooks and courses is a lot quicker for me personally to execute on. But yeah, that's an overview into the calculator. There's no doubt some more information around the video, and I'll leave my contact details below if you're on YouTube. But if you're in a blog post, obviously you can kind of carry on reading now. All right, cheers.